long-haired weirdos, short-haired weirdos, vandals, hooligans.
The government, hug the government, love the government, hug the government, love the government, hug the government.
Welcome to The Politics Guys, a place for bipartisan, rational, and civil debate on American politics and policy. I'm Michael Baranowski, a professor of political science at Northern Kentucky University. I am joined today by two conservative co-hosts, both defender of freedom, Jay Carson, and Trey. I don't really have a moniker for you. You're really the moniker giver, but but also
Bastion of Ration. I don't know.
We'll work on it. But anyway, we also have a number of supporters with us today for this listener supporter segment that we've been wanting to do. As some folks might recall that last week, May actually recommended an article from the New York Times from opinion columnist David Brooks called "What If We're the Bad Guys Here?" And I'd seen it myself. And I thought, well, yeah, this is well worth checking out. And so I included a link to it in the show notes. But in that conversation, we weren't focused specifically on that article. And it's gotten a lot of attention, both from the left and the right, since he put it out. And so we thought it would be a good subject for a segment just focused on it, and to have listeners, supporters to jump in. And for those of you who are listening to this who aren't supporters, this is something we do. We try to do it like once a month, ideally more for supporters, Patreon supporters at the $10 a month or higher level. One of the perks, kind of get more involved in the show sort of thing. And if you want to check that out, it's, I should know, politicsguys.com/support or patreon.com/politicsguys. You think I said this a million times, but still I sometimes forget it. Anyway, with no further ado, going into the piece, David Brooks, who I characterize as sort of a center-right, old-school establishment, elite Republican, if you will, he asks his mostly left-of-center readers from the New York Times to put aside their view that Donald Trump is so enduringly popular because nearly half the country must consist of fearful, reactionary, authoritarian-loving bigots, and to consider the possibility that we, meaning the mostly highly educated, economically secure, culturally ascendant elites who read the New York Times.
The right sort of people.
Yeah, the right sort of people, people like me, might be complicit in creating the sort of economic and social structures that made Trump or someone like Donald Trump essentially inevitable. And of course, the response to this on the right was, hell yes. Many on the left, though, I think, took issue with much of Brooks's argument. And all of us here have had the time to carefully consider what David Brooks wrote, as well as what people have been saying about it. And so we thought it would make for a worthwhile discussion. We'll find out, certainly. But, I've said a lot about this to kind of intro us. So, Trey, why don't we start with you? I know you've had a chance to read it. You may not be a Times subscriber, but I made sure you got a copy of the article because you don't want to support the enemy. But
I'm a Wall Street Journal guy, maybe. Just,
yeah, but what was your take on it?
Well, it's funny. As a matter of fact, I've been waiting to do this all week. I actually printed this one out. It is in my never before nicotine stained fingers right now as we speak. I just figured, since I'm going to be the conservative voice today, I should. No, I'll be honest. I liked it in a lot of ways. I was frustrated by it in a few particular ways. I think one of the things that he missed that I guess that was frustrating for me was, well, part of it is like, hey, I'm an elite. Everybody else is reading this as an elite, which is kind of fascinating, and then its nomenclature in and of itself. But he doesn't include anything about, like, for example, religious identity. And I think that actually plays into this conversation here in a way that he just overlooks. And I think that's one of the problems we have with individuals who are trying to understand the popularity of Trump. I know for me, obviously, I'm not in the Trump camp. But I think one of the major problems is that you've got a lot of individuals who, again, I'm not saying this is the empirical reality of it, but I think that the perception is we put up with a lot of crap for a long time, and now we finally have somebody who's going to be mean back to you, and nobody can take it. And I think that fits his argument in a way, but I think it minimizes some of the additional deeper social issues that aren't just economic in the way that he lays them out.
Well, what about? Well, I guess when I hear that, I think you're right that there's certainly a religious component that he doesn't get into, but it seems to me it's so in so many ways entangled with the social things. You know, I'm thinking about particularly, and this has been a big issue. We've talked about it on the show. I talked about it, I think, last week with May, and it's been a huge issue lately in our Discord about the issue of trans rights and gender affirming care and that sort of thing. And there's a view, and I think not wrongly so, and in some sectors on the right, that there are, or on the left, sorry, that there are a not insignificant portion of people, oftentimes evangelicals on the right, who believe that being transgender or having some kind of different sexual identity is a mental illness and is a deviancy and so forth. And so when I read Brooks's argument, I mean, I think that there are a certain segment of the Trump, a non-trivial segment of Trump supporters and Republican supporters who are in fact anti-trans, who are in fact bigoted and homophobes and so forth. And you can't just whitewash that away. And so I have a certain sympathy for that. I don't know, Jay, what do you think? Or Trey?
Yeah, I'm sorry. Go for it. You start, Jay. Go ahead.
So I will weigh in, and coming from where I often come from, right? Burkean standpoint. And Mike, something that I've argued for years and years and years, some of the most important, that class is a tremendous part of our politics, but it is also a taboo to talk about class in our political system, because we have this vision that we are sort of a classless society. I mean, we don't have the as visible or as I won't say permanent, but the bright lines, I guess, for example, that they do in a lot of Europe. But I think we're getting closer to that. But I've also often pointed to a book by William Fussell on class from like the early 1970s. And it's kind of funny, tongue in cheek. And also Joseph Epstein's Snobbery, which came out probably about 5 years ago or so ago. And they both sort of make the point that in a so-called classless society, right, where it's not a you are upper class, you are working class, what we rely on is this more soft bigotry, soft class markers in order to distinguish us from those who are not as good as us. And I in the sense that, first of all, in one sense, David Brooks is maybe a little insufferable in that it's really our fault, us elites and so forth, and the whole I'm talking to you, the right people, the elites. I mean that puts me off a little bit, but that's more a stylistic thing than it is on the merits. But it does kind of come in with these like, listen, I know that you know, and that we're really the best people, and these other people are not so good. But what if we saw it from their perspective at some point? And again, there's sort of an inherent classism in that.
But I think that's unfair. I think it's unfair because, I mean, what do you expect him to say? I'm going to assume that I'm wrong about everything. I mean, of course, just like conservatives think that they're going to start from the assumption that they're. Go ahead.
It's the we. It's the use of the royal we throughout the article. I think that sort of.
But he's just writing for his audience, right? I mean, why would you? Well, I mean, I guess I'm. It seems like I don't know. It seems to me that, of course, he's writing for the readers who are likely to read him. And if he's addressing those readers, why wouldn't he say, if you are reading this, you are probably somebody who thinks this. And I get why you think this. But I mean, and so
I'm just saying it's a little part. That's part of the problem, right?
Well, can I help? I think what it is. Can I help you there in just a second, Jay? I think what you're getting at, and I think you guys aren't quite disagreeing, is what you're saying, Jay, and I think I was feeling this too, was I don't think that everybody who reads the New York Times is part of the elite but the use of his editorial we makes it sound like if you read David Brooks, then of course you're part of that elite, right?
Yes.
Like, in other words,
Yes.
so if you look at the whole readership in the New York Times, surely there are people who don't fall into the elite category, and yet it feels like he's having this aside conversation. And if you're reading him, of course you're the elite. Is that what you're trying to get at, right?
To me, I got sort of the, the whole title, the "What if we're the bad guys?" There's sort of the underlying presumption of, well, of course we're not.
Well,
And we know who we are, but setting that aside, right? Because again, that's more stylistic than on the merits.
I guess I feel like you guys are being kind of snowflakes here. You're looking for reasons to be offended.
You asked me what I thought.
No.
I'm saying I think I'm not being snowflakey in terms of my gosh, I'm offended. This is horrible. I'm just saying, from a writing standpoint, I think it comes off as kind of conceited. Which that's his thing, but that's sort of the whole. He's almost missing the forest for the trees that anyone of the great unwashed who would read this would read it with the same eyes and would say, "Geez, look at this conceited idiot!" Right? I mean, he's sort of becoming part of the problem, right? Rather than
see, I guess I'm wondering, what could someone of the left do that you would not see as being part of the problem? I mean, it seems to me if you are trying to not just preach to the choir, the elements of any sort of reasonable attempt to try to get somebody to see the other side of you is not to say, hey, let's just assume we're freaking horrible, awful people, but it's say, hey, you know what? I understand you. I agree with you, but let's just take a minute. I mean, he's trying to it seems if he's being honest about this, he's trying to sort of take an audience that is overwhelmingly.
I understand. Yeah, I understand. He's writing for that audience. Yeah,
exactly.
And not every audience is. Yeah, you don't. When you're writing, you're not writing for every audience all the time. I'm like I said, I'm not so much arguing that that's a big issue. I'm sort of saying. This article is exactly the sort of thing that non-elitists point at when they say, look at the elitism. It's sort of like, well, we really should have invited that guy to Buffy's party last week. It acknowledges on a couple of levels that, one, you were invited to the party. Two, you've got the power to invite them or not. And it shows you perhaps have a little regret. But going to the actual meat of the thing, he's right on a lot of levels. And I think you've got folks, and again, he uses words like the less educated, if you know who I mean. That sort of thing, but that they haven't done as well. Well, and there's a fair case to be made that that's always been the case, right? That people in societies who have more education tend to do better, and vice versa. People who tend to do better tend to get more education. I'd
be careful. I think one of the things he's arguing here, and I actually deeply agree with, is I think there has been a shift, if you take a look in the United States, over what it means to have, an education, right? The number of institutions that we kind of now idealize as being the perfect location has shrunk at the same time as the demand for them has increased as we've seen population increases. I don't think we oftentimes think about how much larger we are population speaking than when you look at things historically. And so as those locations have shrunk, it wouldn't have been that long ago that somebody just going to and getting a private liberal arts education would have, you would have broadly thought of them as being, educated. But I think the problem here becomes is that inside of that, we have then now kind of sealed off, well, are you really educated unless you've been to the following?
Well, exactly. No, and there's that.
And that's, I think his point is dead on about that.
Right. And that's sort of the point I was getting to with the Fussell and Epstein part. There's always another velvet rope, and there always needs to be another velvet rope, right? Because if you live,
I was almost with you. Keep going. Sorry.
Yeah, and what if you live in the so-called classless society or believe in the people can rise above whatever their station was, and if you live in an economically vibrant, economically, what's the word I'm looking for? Dynamic society. You're going to have people rising up, the nouveau riche, and what's the old guard to do about them? Well, you put up other velvet ropes, and you say, well, obviously you can't be in the club unless you believe X, Y, and Z, or we're better than this person because we believe in this, and they're these Neanderthal religious knuckle draggers, and it all sounds very, seventh grade, and I think it is, but I think it's part of human experience that's what happens, right? We seek to differentiate ourselves from others, and when you reach a point where economics are not as big a differentiation as they perhaps used to be, then you start getting into other things, and it becomes the virtue signaling, right?
Well,
I talked about this earlier, right, Mike? The magazine that you can order and you can get at select bookstores and comes in the transparent packaging so that everyone knows you're ordering the right magazines.
We hope you enjoyed this preview of our supporters exclusive midweek show. If you'd like to hear the rest of the episode, we hope you'll consider becoming a supporter. Supporters get ad-free access to all of our shows, membership in our Politics Guys Discord group where you can join in on the conversation, and other benefits at different levels of support. To become a supporter, go to patreon.com/politicsguys. You can also support us through Venmo or @politicsguys or through PayPal. You'll find all of our support links in the show notes as well as at politicsguys.com/support. And if you'd like to get the midweek show, but you're not in a position to become a financial supporter, that's not a problem. Just send me an email at mike@politicsguys.com and I'll be happy to get that set up for you.